On this week's episode, we are getting to know Nolan and Lyn Caldwell. They will share how they met, what brought them to Grace Baptist, and how they have been involved in ministry. I'm your host, Aaron Miller, pastor of equipping at Grace Baptist Church in Santa Clarita, California. Welcome to Magnify.
I need these kind of headphones with the kids.
Mommy's going by now.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I've told you you can use mine if you need to.
Get a sensory deprivation chamber as well.
Yeah. You just get the shooting gog,
sure.
earmuffs.
I still don't understand how your gun headphones work, though, because you can talk, but you can't hear the gunshot. I don't understand that. You can hear someone talking.
I think in the world of sound, it's only blocking that
Frequency or whatever.
Yeah.
The loud stuff.
I think it was Aaron Rodgers that did a sensory deprivation exercise where he went into darkness for like 3 days.
Oh my goodness.
And it was, I mean, he's kind of a bohemian guy in a lot of ways anyway. But yeah, it was dark and it was insulated from sound. And it was supposed to be healthy. I don't know, but
I don't think so.
Like,
no,
for your mental state.
No, that would drive me nuts. I'd lose myself.
No.
Like, I don't want to be alone with my thoughts. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Am I alive?
Not too much. I don't need to overwhelm it either.
Mm-hmm.
But goodness. That being said, I think there have been some Sundays that I wish I had one of those chambers in my house.
Yeah.
Today might qualify as one of those days. The way we do this, we just kind of start recording. We don't always tell our guests that we've started, which freaks them out. But,
It's okay.
Again, the power of editing being what it is.
It's weird not being able to actually see you, Aaron, though. I'm going to be like
No,
this.
that's true.
Because I play off of people's faces. Is this person mad at me?
You can move
Is
them.
this person happy? Does Aaron hate what I'm saying?
Well, folks, thanks so much for streaming in. We're sitting down with Nolan and Lyn Caldwell. Many of you know who they are, and I thought it'd be interesting to sit down and hear a little bit about your story. It's always fun to cycle through members of the Grace family, and this is an opportunity for people to get to know the body in a more intimate way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Nolan, Lyn, thanks for being here.
Thanks
Certainly.
for having us.
You've been at Grace, what, your whole life?
I grew up here.
That's right.
I remember the old campus. It was fun.
You've never not been anywhere but Grace. And then Lyn.
Well, I had been here visiting a few times because Nolan was back in town. But then after we got married, we were at a few different churches because we were not living in Santa Clarita.
I do remember that. That's
And
right.
then we came back about 10 years ago because we moved into town. And
So we'll get there.
Yeah.
So let's rewind, though.
yeah.
How and where did you meet?
Well, we met up at school at San Luis Obispo.
Oh, I met Nolan in econ class, but Nolan met me before that. So,
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that. How does
Yeah,
that
no,
work?
yeah. So we both did the construction management program up at Cal Poly.
Okay.
And I was a year ahead of her. And so they always have, for all the freshmen, they always have the new, kind of welcoming ceremonies and
Yeah.
stuff. And then they do that for Campus Crusade as well. And so I remember seeing her at the welcoming facility, ceremonies or whatnot for construction management. And it was really easy because it's like, there's like 4 women in there.
in a group of 200 men is
Right.
the
Yes.
point.
And she's tall enough. So she kind of sticks out. So I was like, oh, hey, she's kind of pretty. There's a woman in construction management. Take note of that.
Nolan prepares for battle,
Yeah.
puts on all the armor.
Oh,
This was
and then-
2 years before we met.
Yeah, exactly. And so we went, I was at another crew event as well. And she was there, and I'm like, oh, sweet. This is awesome.
So wait, at this point, Lyn, you have no recollection or knowledge that you've been noticed.
No, I had never seen Nolan at all.
But he saw you,
Yeah.
which it's obvious to stand out in 4 out of 200,
Yeah, I play the long game.
painfully wear them down over time until they...
Yeah, and so after that, it's like I really didn't ever have a chance to interact with her after that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was like, whatever, I'll just file that in the back of my mind and forget about it.
Well,
I
how long
guess.
did you wait until you started your approach?
Yeah, it was 2.5 years later.
It was 2.5 years later,
That
and
is a long game, bro.
I walk
Yeah.
into econ, and there's just one dude sitting in there, and it's Nolan because we're both early. And so
You walk in, he straightens his posture.
I am like one of those people that I'm not going to ignore the person in the room.
Sure.
I make myself be social. And I go and sit one seat over and start striking up a conversation because he's wearing a Hume Lake shirt and he's got his Bible in his back pocket. So we started talking then. But I guess you had seen me earlier that day.
Also 2.5 years prior.
Yeah.
And that.
And 2.5 years prior.
And so we both had survey class. And I was in that class. She walked in late.
An hour
So
late.
everybody turned and looked at her. And so I was like, oh, hey, it's her. Cool. I was like, maybe I'll have a chance to meet her. And then I didn't get to meet her at all during the whole class. It was a 4-hour class.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's dumb.
Wait, no breaks?
No. At 7 in the morning, which is why I was late, because my schedule when I printed it out started at 8 o'clock. Like that's default.
Yeah,
the classes start at 8 o'clock. I didn't know you could like manually roll it back an hour, which is when my class started. So I came in an hour late and looked like a foolio. So
and so then I went to my next class, economy. All of a sudden she sits down next to me and I'm like, yes, this is perfect. It was set to be this way.
Thank you, Lord.
So 2 days a week we had 6 hours of class together.
Yes, she had to
Lab
be there.
partners. We pretty much spent all Tuesday and Thursday together.
So
for a semester.
every developing relationship has these conversion points.
Yeah.
Right? Where you're like, okay, it's time to go to the next level.
Yeah.
How do you convert it from where you were, merely in the same class, to conversation, to then conversation extended, to then maybe friendship, relationship? Like, what are those points? How did that develop?
Well, the other thing that was pretty cool on Thursdays specifically was the ag department barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
So not only did we have to do class together, but then there was a natural chance to have lunch together. We took that and we became very good friends very quickly.
Nolan was very clear about liking me, though. Like, that was very obvious that he wanted to, he took me out places like very early on. We went and shot guns and we went out to dinner. Like, so you asked me out pretty early on, but we were also spending time together like as friends, and then we were doing these other things. And
were those understood outings?
Yeah, they were. And unfortunately, I kind of, because there's a two-parter to this story, I kind of played along at first. Looking back, like I knew he liked me and I was going along with it. That sounds bad, but I was kind of going along with it in the first part of our relationship. And then very quickly, Noel was very serious about me. Then it kind of struck me that, I've messed up here, because I wasn't quite so sure about him at the time. We had a period of time where we broke up, and then I realized I was an idiot for breaking up with him.
Nolan, you want to push back on that? I can tell in your face.
I was going to say, was it we that broke up?
No, I said we. I broke up with you, because I was an idiot, and then I realized that I was an idiot. So
I mean, I really want to lean into that, and I'm the host, so I can. So how long were you broken up?
Well, so I mean,
we dated for 10 months.
Yeah, we were friends for a while. You had told me that's like you didn't want to get into anything serious quickly, and I tried to honor that, and we kind of went into dating.
Yeah.
And then, I was like, hey, this is, for me, I was like, this is the one. All right.
He knew, like, in like 2 weeks.
Yeah. I figured it out, real quick. And so I was like, oh, hey, a lot of times we go up to Oregon to see my family for Christmas. She should come along.
Yeah.
And how was that?
That was horrible.
Yeah.
It was awful. We broke up because of it.
Wait, whoa. Why was it horrible? I'm just curious.
I was in a place where I had come out of a different relationship, and I was realizing that I didn't really know what love was. I didn't really know what God was leading me towards. And Nolan checked all the boxes, but I had not let my heart come along. I had played along, because I think in the back of my mind, I knew that Nolan was the right kind of man, but there were things that weren't connected, and there was some healing that God had to do in my heart. So I was on that trip. So it was almost,
I would say it was probably a necessary breakup for certain things
God worked a lot there. I mean, that trip I was on as his serious girlfriend, not being ready to be there. And so meeting his family and all the normal things that come along with going on a family trip was like too much. So we broke up for 10 months. Yeah. Nolan graduated in that time. Took off, came back here, was working, and I was still at school for another, was going to be there for another year and a half. And it took a lot of God just really whacking me over the head with some stuff.
I mean, I say this
realized.
kind of tongue in cheek, but God does work in the midst of breakups. Let's lean into that, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of things are revealed.
Yes.
When you got back together, at that point, was marriage in your mind?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, I came literally crawling back, driving down the 101, and I was like so afraid of his mom. I don't know why, which is funny because his mom's so nice. But I was like bringing like gifts because I was like, this is so embarrassing. Like,
Like
I was bringing
gifts?
like walnuts and strawberries that I got on the side of the road. I don't know, Aaron. And so I show up, and basically we had talked on the phone, and I had told him I was coming. And my brother and I had talked before. And my brother's like, "You're like, what are you going to say? Like, you know, like basically that same thing. Like, you know that this has to be make or break, right?" And so I approached him with the basic understanding that yes, we're getting married.
Now, when you got back together, how much time between that moment and when you proposed?
Yeah. So it was another 10 months. She was finishing up
finishing
school. You know, she graduated and we got married like a month later.
Yeah.
I love hearing people's proposal stories. How did it happen?
Well, I mean, I have to go and talk to her dad.
Yep.
I gotta ask for permission, right?
Right.
So I called him up and I was all like vague and weird about it. And I was like, "Hey, can I come up to Monterey from Santa Clarita? This 5-hour trip. I'm just gonna take it."
As one does,
yeah,
randomly.
Right? All, you know, and can we talk about the future and stuff?
Yeah, he knew.
Of course.
He
of
knew.
course. And so I snuck up there and had a conversation with him and Lynn's mom without her knowing.
Yeah, Lyn, you didn't know?
No,
Not at all.
I was on another trip with some friends, and so I didn't know what Nolan was doing that day.
And so I was up just another time visiting at Monterey. I remember waking up early on a Saturday morning and I go into her room and wake her up and I say, "Come on, Lyn, we got to go for a walk."
It was 7 in the morning.
Because we have to.
Yeah.
Just cause.
And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, it's really pretty outside. Come on, let's go."
It was foggy because Monterey is always foggy,
Yeah,
so it wasn't pretty.
Yeah. It was pretty to
It
me.
was fine.
I always find hilarious when I ask people their engagement story, the on-ramp that guys will take to try to convert the moment.
Yeah.
Because you got to get her to the right setting. You got to stage it.
Yeah.
And it's always very choppy. And it's usually, I think, that's what tips it off.
Well, yes and no. I actually didn't know it was
Yeah.
going to
Oh,
happen
did you not?
because there was not a lot of on ramp.
Come on, it's 7
Yeah.
a.m. We have to go for a walk.
Yes.
There was not, but I was like, in my mind, I'm going, he hasn't talked to my dad.
Yeah.
He's not proposing.
Okay.
He's just being weird and wants to go walk in the trees by my parents' house.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So there's like, you know, where her parents' house is, there's like a forest and there's paths. And so it's nice, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, there's like moss hanging out of the trees is really cool to look at. Like, I was just looking for any excuse to like go, right? Lyn is also, she writes poetry. And so one of the short stories or poems that she has, it's written almost kind of creepy, where it's like, there's these two people in the forest and it's like, oh, he's going to murder her or something like that. And then at the very end, it comes in and he proposes to her. So I was, my mind, I was going to not do the same thing.
I was really into M. Night Shyamalan for a little while there.
But it was like, I'll recreate the scene, so to speak, you know? And so we got out there and I was like, "Hey, Lyn, you know that story that you wrote? Like, you know, I was really cool." And then I had her turn around and I was on a knee.
Got it.
Yeah. And then she was like, "Did you ask my dad?"
I said yes first.
Yeah.
How long were you? Not even a month? You were engaged?
No, 5 months.
5
but
months, okay.
I hadn't graduated yet.
Yeah. She hadn't graduated yet.
I got it.
Yeah.
And then during that engagement time, I mean, you're still living up there.
I was still at San Luis Obispo.
Yeah, she was
He
still going to school.
He was living down here.
Yeah, so there was a couple times, because at the time I was actually working in Carpinteria.
Oh.
And so there was a couple times where I'd go up for the weekend and see her and then like leave at like Monday at 3 a.m. and just go straight to work.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You had a ton of friends that were
Yeah.
up there, so you had places to crash. So it wasn't too bad.
Where'd you get married?
We got married up there.
In Carmel. I grew up in a tiny little, like, beautiful chapel church right in the middle of Carmel. So, like, that was a nice little freebie.
I have pictured every Thomas Kincaid painting, you know.
Oh, that's what it looked
Yes.
like.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And then, knew someone who had a golf course thing out in Carmel Valley. His son and I grew up together. So it was like we got hooked up. It was really nice.
But you ended up moving down into LA at some point?
Well, so we moved to Newbury Park after that, actually.
Okay.
So I was still working in Carpinteria and she was working in construction at a job at USC.
Mhm.
And so we were commuting 100 miles away from each other every day.
I was
And-
literally driving
Yeah.
like 75 miles.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Goodness.
Yeah.
So we wore ourselves out real quick.
Yeah, you did.
And so the company that she was working for is actually the company that I wanted to get on with after school, but it was right in the recession when I graduated. So I took whatever I could get. We were both getting tired out, and so she approached them and said, "Hey, I think I need to kind of stop." And they said, "Hey, we remember Nolan. How about we just hire him instead and we move you down here?" So then we moved to Koreatown, which was super exciting
Yeah.
in every
So
sense of
much
the
fun.
word.
So how long were you there?
We were there for
Over a year.
Yeah, it was a little over a year.
Yeah.
So that was your first, that was not your first year. That was rounding
That was
into
our-
your-
That was
Like
our second,
year. In
your second
into
year,
the
yeah.
third year. Yeah.
yeah.
So back up, that first year of marriage, again, another question I always like to kind of get into, involving conflict.
Hmm.
Do you remember your first conflict as a married couple?
You know, honestly, our first year, I hate to
It was a
say
blur.
it was a blur, but it was pretty good.
That's our story.
Yeah, I think because we both had a pretty good idea of who the other person was, and we had a pretty good friendship. Our conflicts came later. Our
Yes.
conflicts were very external at that time. It was the work issue. It was, I threw my back out driving. Like, it was that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
Sure.
So it wasn't
Relational.
relationally, except for like the little things of like, oh, I realize you like to kind of sleep in on Saturdays and I want to do stuff, like that kind of stuff.
No, that was Ingrid and I. We were married for 4 years before we started having kids. It was great.
Yeah.
And then kids came and like,
Right.
who are you?
Oh yeah.
And that was basically, it wasn't until we were back up here in Santa Clarita. And I do remember, I was thinking about the first altercation, but I don't know if it's the same one as you remember.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Let's see if you all think about the
So
same thing here.
the most significant one that sticks out on my mind of like a time that I was really hurt or like that it actually became something was Nolan has a really good group of guy friends that he grew up with here at the church and that they kind of kept in contact through college. They would periodically get together as the years have gone on. They've kept it up and they would get together. And I am kind of the oddball out of the wives, not because I don't get along with them, but because they all grew up together and or dated in college and kind of already knew each other. I'm like,
You just didn't run in the circle.
I
Sure.
met them later. And all that to say, I think I had just had Elizabeth or something, so our first kid, and Nolan had one of these weekends with the men. And we were already kind of independent as far as like, I don't need to have Nolan around all the time, but he was going to go off and do this. And I was like, oh, that's fine. Like, I just won't even call or check in. You're with your guys. It's all fine. And you came home, and I had a weekend with the baby, and he came home from it, and I was asking how it went, and he starts to talk about it, and he's like, and then, Sunday morning, blah, 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 so-and-so, so-and-so, and he starts to name some of the wives. And they were there at this thing. Like some of those wives had like shown up over the course of the weekend and had been included on certain activities. And I had been home alone
With
and
the
hadn't got a
baby.
phone call, and I was hurt and I was upset. And I think we had a pretty big argument about it. And looking back, you were right. It wasn't like really anything you could have done about it. It wasn't something he known
Sure.
was going to happen.
Sure.
He didn't even think to call me because like it happened so quickly, but
Right.
it just came across.
In many ways, circumstantial.
It was circumstantial.
Yeah, sure.
But it was one of those things where I felt, hurt.
I mean, both of you are in marriage ministry,
Yeah.
right? And we always like to find that season of our marriages where we can identify where we've been in need of God's grace,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
that rhythm is going to be so determinative and helpful as a point of reference the longer we're married.
Yeah.
We're going to continue to hit conflict. That's not just going to go away
Oh,
once
yeah.
you reach a certain maturity point with Christ. And so do you remember that season where you realize, hey, I've really got to reach for my faith in a way that I never have before? I mean, it could have been that moment where he was off with the guys for that weekend. But do you remember, was it within the first year, second year, where you begin to realize that this really had to be integrated with God's grace or was never going to work?
No, it was not until like the 6th year.
Yeah, it
6
was.
years.
It was not until children, and definitely, I think it was
Second kid.
at least 2 children. I think is what it was.
Yeah.
Well, and it was that 5th, 6th year where a lot of external issues came in and started exposing
Yeah.
other things for us, right?
And that's, kind of the time in which your identity, are you getting wrapped up in being a mom?
Yeah.
Are you
Right.
getting wrapped up in being at work? I mean, he was under a lot of pressure and we were both kind of just drowning in what is our role here at home, and how are we interacting with each other when we just felt so lost and so burdened down by the day by days. I'm like covered in children and I'm going like, who am I? You know, and those, I think those come every 10 years, but you're not prepared for the first one, that first kind of identity crisis, and coming back to a sense of identity in Christ and love for one another.
Hey everyone, Pastor Jared here. We're excited to offer a 5-week discussion about the basics of the Christian faith called Exploring Christianity, starting Sunday, April 7th at 10:45 a.m. This is a great opportunity for those interested in the Christian faith, those new to the faith, or those who just want to know more, as we'll explore the foundations of what it means to know and follow God. As always, you can find out more information at gracebaptist.org. I hope you can join us.
What's a good segue? Just tell us about your family.
All right. Well, we have 3 kids. Elizabeth is 10, Hadley is 8, and Sean will be 6 in May. And they are a handful, and they're the best.
They're really good.
Yeah.
For us, we had them pretty close as well. At one point, 3 of them under 5.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, I did not know I needed this much grace.
Yeah.
I knew I needed grace.
Oops.
I didn't know I needed this much grace.
Right.
And that's, again, in our marriage as well. That's where we begin to really experience certain trials. Did you have expectations that you were going to be one particular type of mom, and then you got into it and you're like, holy cow?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't so much that I had an expectation. I didn't have a lot of big, bright ideas. I wasn't convinced on a lot of things, but I had some maybe arrogant beliefs about myself and who I was that quickly came up against the mirror as soon as you have those children. First of all, I didn't have a lot of experience with children. I'm the youngest of a family of 4 kids.
Oh,
and
you don't like children.
I didn't even like kids. I like junior hires. You know, I didn't really like babies except for my brother's kids and whatever. But I figured that would all be okay.
Sure.
And by and large, that part wasn't really the issue. What I encountered early on that just brought a lot of fear and shame was I actually was an angry mom. And I came up against that blindsided. I mean, because I had not considered myself an angry person. I kind of dealt with that as a kid. I had some anger issues, but like as a early teen and college student and early adulthood, like that was not something I struggled with. That was not, I thought God had dealt with that. And I really had considered myself like a low maintenance person, but that was just my arrogance at work because when you can take care of yourself, of course you're low maintenance.
Sure. Yeah.
But all of a sudden you have these children and you're overtouched, all your senses.
Overstimulated.
You're overstimulated. Thank you
Yeah.
for the word. I just didn't know that I would be so bothered by certain things. And then the more angry I got, right? Because I was upset with myself. And I felt very alone in that because Nolan didn't seem to struggle with it, at least when you were younger. I mean, I think now we both are probably proportionally struggle with, getting ticks at our kids.
Nolan, is that true? Did you have unmet expectations as a younger father?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect, really, with children. I mean, I think that you probably lean on, like, your own family situation that you grow up with and, your dad. And so it's like, we had a similar situation. And so I kind of figured on going into that. But it's weird. I grew up as an only child. So in the same way, it's like,
Sure.
I'm used to not having to take care of other people, right?
Yes.
And so learning how to do that was a big one for me. And not just the physical steps of changing diapers or doing this or that, but it's the mindset.
Yes. I'd resonate with that. I was not an only child, but I am 5 and 7 years removed from my 2 half-sisters. And so essentially, I was the only son. I was older. I had a lot of autonomy.
Yeah.
And again, when it comes to me being a father, that was my point of reference.
Right.
In many ways, Ingrid felt trapped.
Yeah, and that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yes, I was left alone in my own head and kind of trying to take care of all those things. And then with the anger, I really felt alone. And Nolan's always been a really good father, but he has grown in his engagement as a father as he's overcome some of those tendencies of just having been alone.
I remember those conversations with Ingrid, which is, sweetheart, I know this is hard to believe, but this is not vicious. In that it's not even occurring to me.
Right.
Yes.
Like if it's occurring to me and I'm dismissing it, but like, please give me grace. I'm not even, the category's not been developed. And that's so hard to admit.
Yes.
but it was just true, you
Yeah.
know.
It's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, yeah. What did God do, or what did he use to give you that grace as young parents? It's a hard season, you know.
Well, I mean, going back to that 5 or 6 year, time mark in our marriage, we had a lot of things going on, family sicknesses. I had a lot of stress at work. It's like I have a very, strong sense of wanting to provide, but to an unhealthy amount where I get stressed out about it.
Yeah.
And so then the more I get stressed out about it, the more I feel like I'm not doing well. And so then I get more stressed out about it. Just a feedback loop, right?
Sure, right.
Through that period, we kind of kept drifting apart a little. And it got to a breaking point where we just realized that we were kind of going in opposite directions, right? And we kind of recognized that that was unsustainable. And so I think through that process, it's like, no. It's not just me over here and she's over here and we've got all of our zones covered. We were being independent, right?
You were just functioning.
Yes.
It
And
wasn't like friendship.
no, it was not friendship. It was not marriage. And so it was like, no. We need to be doing everything together. And, I think one of the ways I've described it, it's not 50% and 50%. It's 100% and 100%.
Right. Yeah.
I think during that time, though, looking back, seeing God work through the church in our lives more than any other time in my life, kind of unbeknownst to me, though. I mean, we had done the right things in that we had gotten involved at a church. We had formed friendships. That was important to both of us. So through those things that we knew we ought to do, God worked.
Yes.
And so we had support around us, and we had friends who continued to draw us in. We had people here who continued to make, Nolan was having a hard time finding a place to serve, but then we had people who were drawing him in. Like, it was weird. It was just weird things that kept happening. And that was discouraging in us feeling isolated. But then there was people who continued to just come out of nowhere and draw us in. And I, in my loneliness, my anger, like, I experienced just a lot of encouragement in our mom's group, which was MOPS at the time, and just hearing other people say, yeah, me too. And like, no one had ever talked about that before, like, and that these are the struggles we come up to, but we can find God's grace. And just having friends that had walked along before us. And we have those same friends now. So I think that was where God showed up, looking back now, that we were just surrounded by God's body, and they never let us go.
I think sometimes that's the biggest hurdle for people, that we, not only just pastorally, but you also are in ministry at this church, and through the marriage ministry, you've identified with this. The big hurdle is conflated in people's mind. Like, oh, I need to do some monumental change. And like, look, hey, you know what? Let's be honest. Maybe.
Yeah.
But mostly it's just relying upon those really old-fashioned, ordinary rhythms of being connected to a body that loves you and is going to be Christ to you.
Like you said, when you're plugged into the body, the whole body's there to help you out and support you.
As parents, how have you needed to rely upon the body as a source of encouragement? Like, what are some of the relationships? You can name them if you want, or just describe them. Who has God used in this place?
I mean, we're a part of an ABF, Bliss, which has just been crucial. I mean, having people who went into parenthood before us and being able to just emulate the good things that we saw, but also just be able to be honest about the hard things and receive encouragement there. Also find encouragement in seeing, how do I put this, people living out their faith who are just different than us. Like, you come into a group of people who are all different, and they aren't people that maybe you would have naturally gravitated to, but over the years, seeing them live faithfully and make choices for their family that you see God using just bolsters your own faith.
Yes.
And just bolsters your own decisions for your own family, whether or not you make the same ones.
Right. It's hard to put words around it because it just seems so ordinary.
Yes, exactly.
It just lives, rub it up against other lives, and the life of Christ together.
The peer group, as I'd call that, was a huge one. Just seeing that, hey, I'm not the only one who's having to deal with this issue. That's a big one. Yeah. But another one for me is, especially because I had, the opportunity of growing up in the church, and, I've had people disciple me, I've had Bible study leaders, and to keep those connections with those leaders and their families. And to see them develop back when I was in junior high or high school, but keep going as I'm here now. And they're in different stages of life. And I've seen and learned a lot from that as well.
You all serve in various ministries here in the church. I mean, you both, again, are in marriage ministry. I know that, Nolan, you're in a few other men's groups. You do discipleship. Lyn, you teach quite actively in our women's ministry as well. Just describe how God has used those ministries for the sake of your marriage, but also as partners in parenting.
Well, one of the big things for me and for us was getting involved in the marriage ministry. That was coming on the tail end of
Those hard years.
Yeah, those hard years for us. And there was a big component of really seeking each other and investing in our marriage. That was a big one. And I absolutely loved that we got to do that together, that we get to do that together. That's been a huge one for us. Being intentional about our marriage with each other, right?
Yeah.
And just all the opportunities that has allowed us to be better parents, to strengthen our walk with Christ even. It's just been such a blessing for us.
Mm-hmm.
And allowing God to speak and work through the hard things.
Yes.
I mean, folks, one of the things that we do in the marriage ministry, those who are in leadership are used to this. We'll get up in front of a group of 40, 60, 80 people, depending on how many people have registered for that season of ministry, and we share our marriage stories. So what we do is we talk about a point of conflict at some point in time in our marriage and how God, by his grace, by the power of the gospel, redeemed that moment and secured us in our oneness. And many times stories that are shared are mild disagreements all the way to close to divorce level situations. And in the end, the final analysis, God has been proven to be faithful by the power of his gospel. And when you all have shared your story, I know that that's always a platform for people and a point of reference for people that is encouraging to those other marriages. Do you have any testimony to how God has used that?
Yeah, I mean, I think every time we've shared our story, someone has come up to us after and said, hey, we're going through that too. Especially, I think, because uniquely in our story, just that independence element where we found ourselves very far away. I think every marriage gets to that. Well, not every marriage, hopefully not, but like gets to that point where they find themselves walking two different paths, and that is a marriage killer.
You start to settle into your roles and get complacent.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you may be walking semi-parallel, but you're not together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's, like I said, it's like we're playing zone defense in a way.
Yeah.
But we're in different zones. And that's not how it's supposed to be.
In your marriage, Lyn, how do you know that? How are you feeling supported by Nolan? And how do you know if you are in that role?
This actually kind of goes back to the question of you were asking how have the ministries that we're a part of grown our marriage and our parenting. As Nolan has gotten more involved and had more leadership and more opportunities to serve, the secureness of our marriage and our role as parents has just grown exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of women sometimes feel this angst as they're getting opportunities to serve in the church, because sometimes it's just easier for women to find that role, especially if they've grown up in church in general. Yeah. And I was feeling that anxiety and the tension for Nolan as he's being pulled to work, but he's also called to serve. And it's hard because you're waiting for, well, how is God leading our family? And I know that needs to come from Nolan. So as he's gotten those opportunities, I feel supported because now I feel free to both encourage and support him, but also to continue in the ministries that God's put me in. Nolan's always my biggest, fan and, someone who encourages me, and he trusts me with so many things, but I don't want our family to be pulled in two different directions. Yeah. So I feel supported as he engages more with the church.
Yeah, I love that. Again, it's nothing that you necessarily intentionally know is a direct benefit to your marriage, and yet God uses those things.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about identity real quick because, married people with children are not the only ones that listen to the podcast, right? And many times, Lyn, you mentioned this earlier, identity can find its way into these roles that God has given us, right? And those roles, if they become ultimate, will betray us and hurt us. Plenty of parents make parenting their identity.
Yes.
And they make being a family man or they make being a mom their ultimate identity. So that what happens is when that stage of life is beyond them, it's past, they're empty nesters or whatever. Suddenly they're looking across the dinner table and they're looking at, the spouse going like, who are you? Or they're looking in the mirror and going, who am I?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so your identity is secured in Christ, right? How does that then, of course, it benefits the marriage, it benefits your partnership in parenting, but how are you cultivating that identity and reminding yourself, I'm a daughter of the King, I'm a son of God?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
I think this is actually just something I struggle with a lot and something I ruminate on. And I said, I think everyone comes into these kind of like identity crises as their roles change. And it is always coming back to, how does God see me? Who has he made me to be? And I am so thankful that I have just a lifetime to look back on to see God being faithful. And I can remember where he's brought me and what he's brought me through and what he's called me to, like what my passions are, what are the things that he's designed and created me to be. And I feel like this is something actually I've just been going through right now. Martha has us reading this book by Kelly Kapik that's called You're Only Human. It's about our just our limitations as creaturely beings. And one of the main things he talks about there is just the fact that God likes us. Sometimes we forget that. In his love, when he came to save us, he also created us.
Right.
His desire for his creatures never changed. He didn't like make a mistake. We aren't our sin. Our sin, was dealt with on the cross, but all the ways in which I'm limited, all the ways in which I'm weird or strange, God likes.
Yeah.
And he loves me. And so I have to remember that, though. I have to continue to press into that because, it's easy to lose yourself.
Especially when you're up your eyeballs with just family activities and you're caravanning the kids to this, to that, to this sport or that game.
Or in a season, I find when I'm overwhelmed with my sin, when I realize, hey, I don't like myself very much.
Yeah. Nolan, anything to add to that?
No, yeah. I think there's a lot of influences coming in from all different directions, right?
Yeah.
From culture. One of the things that I think about is I am so happy and blessed that I've been in the church as long as I have and that I've had history there and longevity there to learn a lot, but also not to have to experience some of the things that not being in the church brings, right? And so one of the things that I've seen is being able to serve in the church and give back into that system that has really brought me up to who I am today, right?
I mean, there are people in this church that have seen you in all the stages
That's
of
right.
life.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I love that I can now be a part of that and give back into that and really bless those around me and hopefully point them to God, right? Like that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to do that. And so having that opportunity has been a big one for me and just learning all about that, what all that means and continually getting into that.
Yeah. I mean, it's foundational stuff we're identifying. And the reason why I wanted to tap into it is because, Lyn, how many moms do you talk to or newly married women? Their identity is in that family culture or as moms or Nolan for you, guys are getting into their careers. And so their identity is as a provider and a protector. These are all good things and they're ordained by God. But we've also seen them betray people in the church at some point in time if they're not careful.
Oh, yeah.
And the floor can be taken out from underneath of you and you're questioning your foundation and you're like, who is this person I married? And it wasn't supposed to be this hard. I was supposed to be the best mom. And then you're comparing yourself to other people in the church.
Even just this, now my kids are all in school. And I tell you, the barrage of condemnation that comes not from other people, my own self of you should be doing this, and this is how you should be, and this is what you should be involved in. And I just remember, a few months ago, I was bawling outside of my house, sitting on our porch swing, and it just came to me this thought that if all I did today was lay on the couch because I couldn't do anything else, meaning if I was unable, God would still love me. I'm still Lyn.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the mentality that I have instead of all the shoulds, all the I need to be a better mom, I need to be a better wife, I need to do this. It's really easy to start the comparison and to get lost in that. We are first and foremost beloved by God.
Yeah.
Through everything that I've learned through my walk with Christ really is that I have to push back on that and remember that is the foremost thing for me to be, is to be a child of God, right? And that comes first above all other things. That's what I have to seek. That's what I have to do. That's what I have to be. And ultimately, just give glory back to God.
Well, guys, we got to start landing the plane here. But I just want to thank God for you publicly on this podcast, because your willingness to be vulnerable with so much. I've seen you do this so many times, whether it be on stage or in marriage ministry, to be vulnerable and just to speak directly to a thing in the area of the hard things of life. God has used in ways that you both see the fruit of, but also majority is unseen. And so I'm thankful to call you friends, and it really is a blessing to partner with you in that ministry. So love you guys very, very much. I look forward to hopefully having you on this podcast in the future, just to get an update on the life of the Caldwells.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Make sure to subscribe to Magnify Podcast so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. We would love to hear from you, so if you have any questions you'd like to ask in our mailbag, you can email them to magnify@gracebaptist.org, and we will answer them on the show. Thank you so much for streaming.